So chapter 2, verse 1, now a man of the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. She placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. This is calling back a little bit to Genesis 6 through 9. You don't get the waters, like covering back over and being separated again. You don't get the recreation and decreation, the undoing of Genesis 1, the redoing of Genesis 1, like you do with the flood. But you get this whole thing. There's a little ark. There's a little mini ark floating across the water that is supposed to be saving the life that is on board to a new life, to a life outside of the chaos, outside of death, not being caught up in death. So this is kind of cool. I love seeing how even within the first 5 books, the Torah, how they just keep playing with this language from like the first 2 chapters, and then with the first 11 chapters of Genesis, and they're playing with all this language to describe all these events. It's really, really fascinating what they do here. Anyways, we were at verse 4. So his sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Verse 5, then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her female slave to get it. She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying. She felt sorry for him. This is one of the Hebrew babies, she said. Then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you? Yes, go, she answered. So the girl went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you. So the woman took the baby and nursed him. When the child grew old, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, I drew him out of the water. We're going to keep going, though, because we're going to go back to Matthew 2, and we'll stick there for a little bit. One day after Moses had gone up, he went out to where his own people were and watched them at their hard labor. And he saw an Egyptian being a Hebrew, one of his own people. And we know the story. He kills the man, and then later he sees 2 Hebrews fighting, and then he says, why are you hitting a fellow Hebrew? And they're like, what are you going to do? You're going to kill us like you killed the Egyptian? And he's like, shoot, they know that I killed the guy. And then he books it. So he exits Egypt. And then we know later, I'm going to get a little ahead of myself here. So he exits Egypt. And if we skip ahead a little bit, we're going to come back to those passages later. He then comes back into Egypt to then bring the people out of Egypt again. So what we get here is that Moses is put on this little ark to be saved from Egypt's oppression, to then be saved by someone in Egypt, or by Egypt in some capacity, to then escape Egypt, and then he'll later come back and leave Egypt again. So here's where there's some other cool things that are happening with Matthew. He escaped to Egypt. When they had gone, an angel of the Lord said to Joseph in a dream, get up, he said, take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. Okay, so they're escaping from the oppression. What's interesting is that the initial escape is from Egypt for Moses, from the hands of Egypt. And in this case, there's an inversion where Jesus has, like the saving of Jesus' family and him as a baby is to go to Egypt. So we get an inversion here. The land of God's people is now the place that is not safe. That's the place of oppression. Versus in Egypt, it was that place. So they want to get out of Egypt. In this case, he's going to Egypt. There's a weird inversion here. But at the same time, this also matches the motif, because who is the person that pulls Moses out of water? An Egyptian woman who is Pharaoh's daughter. Well, in this case, so is a person of Egypt in some capacity that also saves, as the figure is being used to save. And now you have Egypt, again, that's being used as a place to save. So there's a weird mixture of it's an inversion, but also in line with the motif. And it's really kind of fascinating how he's playing into both at the same time. It's like, so he escapes into Egypt, kind of like how, Moses is put into the water, and then an Egyptian woman, Pharaoh's daughter, is the one who pulls him out. But also it's an inversion. Before, it was the land of Egypt is oppressing God's people, and now the land of God's people is oppressing the one that is to be the king. And then you get into this next little bit, where he says that, so he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet. Again, this is Hosea. Out of Egypt, I called my son. And so there, Matthew's saying not only is this an Exodus moment, this is also tying into Hosea, where now you have God's son is coming out of Egypt. And so this one who's going to represent Israel, which he's going to be the new Moses and the new Israel, he's going to be like representing both in this literary style, is being called out of this place, of which, before, again, in the Old Testament was a place of oppression, a place of destruction, a place of death. But this time, Jesus is going there, he's being brought there to preserve his life. I think it's really interesting how Matthew's playing a little bit with both. Maybe I'm overemphasizing the exact parallel of Pharaoh's daughter and Egypt itself. There's definitely the inversion here. The inversion is not deniable, in my opinion. But the Pharaoh's daughter thing, I think you could argue back and forth for that. I think it's kind of cool to see how Matthew's playing with both. But then you get towards the bottom where, we get the whole thing with Herod. Herod seeks to kill him, and then Herod dies, and then we have an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who were trying to take the child's life are dead." He got up and took the child and his mother and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning in Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Having been warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee, and he went and lived in a town called Nazareth. So was fulfilled what was said through the prophets, that he would be called a Nazarene. So now we have that he has gone into Egypt and he's gone out of Egypt in terms of his actual geographical location, but also he's escaped Egypt in terms of Herod, the oppressor. And then so Jesus is kind of being set up as this Moses and Israel, more specifically Moses in this case. And then we're going to see how Matthew plays into this language throughout the rest of the book, to amongst other language as well, because he was a very brilliant Jew, brilliant writer. And we'll see how you see how he plays into this being the great Exodus, and more than just the localized, the geographical scale, but now on this really broad, breaching into the Gentiles as well, as we see with his ministry. And so that's an introduction, I think, to what's going on here. There's so much we could talk about here. I know it'd be a greater benefit if I had Caleb or one of my buddies to just kind of bounce off ideas, maybe to catch something I didn't catch, or to kind of explain something else a little bit further. But I hope that this kind of gets a little bit of interest into the topic that we're going to be getting into on our Tuesdays for the next little bit. And we're going to keep going with this in the next few weeks. We'll pick up with the next set of chapters